What happens when a legendary country music star walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a conversation about her latest album, only to be met with a host eager to steer everything into political conflict? What unfolded became one of the most unforgettable moments on daytime television. Joy Behar appeared confident she could put Reba McEntire on the defensive, but instead found herself facing a calm, confident response that left the studio silent and the audience stunned. It became a reminder that underestimating one of country music's most respected performers can quickly backfire. The day began like any other inside the View studios. Reba McEntire arrived ahead of schedule with her signature red hair neatly styled and an elegant navy blazer that reflected both confidence and class. She had accepted the invitation to promote her upcoming tour and newest music, something she'd done countless times throughout her remarkable career. As she settled into the green room and adjusted her microphone, she had no reason to believe the interview would become anything more than a friendly discussion. "We're back in 30 seconds, the floor manager announced while crew members hurried around preparing the set. Reba exchanged warm smiles with the panel, and Whoopi Goldberg greeted her with an encouraging nod. She had always enjoyed appearing on the show because the conversations were usually energetic and welcoming. Yet something about this visit felt different. There was a tension hanging in the air that she couldn't quite explain. The countdown began. 3, 2, the cameras rolled as the familiar theme music faded away. "Welcome back to The View," Joy Behar said with her trademark grin. "Today we're joined by country music icon Reba McEntire, who has a new tour on the way. But before we get into the music, I think our viewers would like to hear where you stand on some of the biggest issues affecting working Americans." Reba's smile softened for a moment. This wasn't the direction she had anticipated. "Well, Joy, I'm really here to talk about the music and spend some time with the fans who've supported me for so many years." "Oh, come on," Joy replied, leaning forward. "You have a huge platform and millions of people listening to you. Surely you have opinions about what's happening across the country. Your audience is mostly conservative, isn't it? Rural America. The same people who have been voting against their own interests." A wave of discomfort spread through the audience. Even Whoopi looked surprised by how quickly the conversation had turned confrontational. Reba straightened in her chair. Years on stage had taught her how to recognize the mood of a room, and she could sense things changing. "Joy, I think you're making assumptions about my fans that simply aren't fair," she answered calmly. "My audience includes people from every background imaginable. They're teachers, nurses, ranchers, business owners, veterans, and hardworking parents. They're decent people who care deeply about their families. But let's be honest," Joy interrupted. "Many of those same people support policies that hurt women, ignore climate science, and oppose reproductive rights. How do you entertain people whose values seem so outdated?" The studio became almost completely silent except for the sound of the cameras. Reba's expression barely changed, but her voice remained steady. "I think you're confusing political labels with real people. The people who come to my concerts aren't defined by who you believe they voted for. They're mothers worrying about their children, fathers working long hours to provide for their families, and young people trying to build better futures." Joy wasn't satisfied. "That's a clever way to avoid the question. Country music has struggled with diversity and inclusion for years. The genre has often failed to represent voices of color. Don't you think someone with your influence should be speaking out about those problems?" For the first time, viewers could see a firmer side of Reba. "Joy, I believe you should learn more about country music before making broad claims. The genre has always been shaped by blues, gospel, and folk traditions from many different communities. Artists like Charlie Pride, Darius Rucker, Mickey Gotton, and Kane Brown aren't symbols. They're respected performers who earned their success through talent and hard work." Joy continued pressing forward. "But historically, the industry has been exclusionary, and your silence during major social justice movements says a lot. When Black Lives Matter was at the center of national conversations, where was Reba McEntire?" The atmosphere instantly grew heavier. Reba leaned in slightly, her voice still composed, but carrying unmistakable conviction. "My silence. Joy, I don't think you've paid much attention to my career. For over 40 years I've supported charities, invested in programs for disadvantaged children, and helped people from every background. I simply don't believe every act of kindness has to become a public announcement or a political statement." Joy's confidence appeared to fade as she realized her usual approach wasn't having the intended effect. "It's convenient to point to charity instead of taking clear political positions," Joy responded. "Your fans deserve to know exactly where you stand." And what makes you believe they don't? Reba answered, her Oklahoma roots becoming more noticeable in her voice. You're telling me what my fans think, what they believe, and what they should expect from me. But when was the last time you actually spent time with them? When was the last time you visited a small town, sat across the table from working families, and listened to their stories instead of assuming you already knew the answers? The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. This conversation was clearly not unfolding the way Joy had expected. Whoopi cleared her throat, sensing that the tension was building, but Joy seemed too committed to the argument to step back. I don't need to travel through small-town America to understand that many of your fans support politicians whose policies affect women's rights, environmental issues, and social progress, Joy said, her voice growing stronger. And when you refuse to criticize those choices, you become part of the problem. That was the moment the atmosphere shifted. Reba's expression changed completely. The warm, easygoing country singer was replaced by a woman who had built a remarkable career through determination and hard work. Someone who was not willing to let others dismiss the people who had supported her for decades. She carefully placed her coffee cup on the table. The soft sound echoed through the silent studio. When Reba looked back at Joy, there was a new intensity in her eyes that made everyone pause. This was no longer a routine interview. This was a woman who had spent years in the entertainment industry and knew exactly when to stand her ground. Joy, let me tell you something about judgment, Reba said calmly, though there was unmistakable strength in her voice. Judgment is believing you understand millions of people without ever listening to their stories. It's assuming that anyone who disagrees with you must be wrong, uninformed, or uncaring. Joy started to interrupt, but Reba gently raised her hand. No, you've spoken. Now let me speak. You want to discuss my fans? Let me tell you about Sarah from Tennessee, a single mother working multiple jobs who saved money for months just so she could take her daughter to one of my concerts, because music gave them a chance to forget their worries for a little while. Or Frank from Iowa, a veteran living with PTSD who finds comfort in songs that remind him of home and family. These are real people with real lives, not stereotypes or labels. The audience sat in complete silence. Some leaned forward in their seats, fully absorbed in the unexpected exchange. Even members of the camera crew seemed frozen, careful not to miss a single moment. Joy attempted to regain control, though her voice sounded less certain. Look, I'm not criticizing your fans personally, but we can't ignore the larger political consequences. Reba answered immediately. You mean the consequences of people in positions of influence telling others what they should think? The consequences of dismissing entire communities simply because they see the world differently. Whoopi tried to step in. Ladies, maybe we should? No, Whoopi, Joy replied, though some of her confidence had faded. I want to hear how Reba explains staying out of important social conversations when she has such a powerful platform. Reba gave a brief, measured laugh. Educate people, Joy, Reba said quietly. Music has been bringing people together, comforting families, and helping people through difficult times long before talk shows started dividing everyone into political categories. That isn't education, Reba replied. That's trying to tell people what they should believe. And it's disrespectful to millions of Americans who are more than capable of making up their own minds. But surely you recognize that some issues are simply right or wrong. Joy continued, a hint of frustration beginning to show. Human rights, equality, basic decency? Those aren't political preferences, they're moral responsibilities. You're absolutely right, Reba answered. For a brief moment, Joy looked encouraged. They are moral responsibilities, Reba continued. Which is exactly why it's concerning when anyone believes they alone get to define morality. Let me ask you something, Joy. When was the last time you spent time at a food bank in rural America? When was the last time you volunteered at a shelter outside the biggest cities? When was the last time you rolled up your sleeves and worked alongside the communities you say you care about? Joy's expression tightened. I support many charities and organizations. Writing a donation is valuable, Reba replied. But it isn't the same as truly understanding how people live. Every day you sit here explaining what's wrong with America, yet you've surrounded yourself with people who mostly agree with you. How can you fully understand working families if you haven't shared their daily struggles in years? The other hosts shifted uneasily in their seats. The conversation had moved far beyond a typical disagreement and become something much deeper. I don't appreciate the suggestion that I'm disconnected, Joy fired back, finally losing some of her composure. I grew up in a working-class family. I know what hardship looks like. Do you still remember it? Reba asked quietly. The question hung over the studio. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems you've forgotten where you started. Somewhere along the way, authenticity gave way to applause, and understanding was replaced with scoring political points. The woman who grew up facing those challenges might not recognize the person you've become today. The room became so quiet that even the faint hum of the studio equipment could be heard. Joy searched for a response but couldn't immediately find one. You want to talk about using influence responsibly? Reba continued, her confidence growing with every sentence. Then let's talk about how you use yours. Day after day, you come onto this stage and encourage division by treating people with different opinions as if they're enemies instead of fellow Americans. Political conversations shouldn't become competitions where one side is simply dismissed. That's Joy stammered, clearly thrown off balance. We discuss important issues. We hold people accountable. No, Joy, Reba replied firmly. Holding people accountable and attacking them aren't the same thing. Her words landed with quiet precision. Real accountability means listening, asking honest questions, and respecting different perspectives even when you disagree. What often happens instead is that people are judged before they've even had a chance to explain themselves. Outrage becomes louder than understanding, and conversations stop being about solutions. Joy glanced toward her co-hosts, hoping someone would step in, but they remained silent, watching the exchange unfold. Finally, Joy spoke again. I think we've gotten away from the original topic. This interview was supposed to be about your music. Reba smiled politely, though there was unmistakable confidence behind it. No, Joy. You changed the subject. I came here to talk about music, but you chose to turn this into a political debate. You assumed that because I'm from Oklahoma and sing country music, I'd fit neatly into the picture you already had in your mind. She paused before adding, and that's the problem with assumptions. They're convincing, right up until they're proven wrong. A quiet murmur spread through the audience. Several people nodded as they listened. Joy could sense the atmosphere shifting. The confidence she had shown at the beginning of the interview was fading. You're putting words in my mouth, she said. I never claimed you were an easy target. Reba leaned back in her chair, completely composed. From the moment this conversation began, you've spoken down to me, made assumptions about my fans, questioned my values, and expected me to defend myself according to your standards. If that isn't treating someone like an easy target, I'm not sure what is. Joy's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water, and the confident image she had maintained throughout the interview began to fade. The host, who was known for challenging guests with sharp remarks, suddenly found herself struggling to answer someone who remained calm under pressure. You know what disappoints me the most, Joy? Reba said, her tone no longer angry, but genuinely saddened. Today you had the chance to have an honest conversation with someone who's spent decades meeting people from every corner of this country. Instead, you chose to turn the interview into a confrontation because you thought it would make good television. I wasn't trying to ambush you, Joy replied quietly. I was asking important questions. No, Reba answered. You weren't really asking questions. You were presenting conclusions and disguising them as questions. There's a big difference between asking, what's your perspective on these issues, and asking, how do you justify supporting people whose values are wrong? One invites conversation. The other starts with an accusation. The other hosts watched in complete silence. It was clear they hadn't expected the discussion to unfold this way, and the audience followed every word with complete attention. Joy made one final attempt to regain control. Surely you understand why people want celebrities to speak openly about important social issues. Of course I understand, Reba replied, her voice calm. There's nothing wrong with asking those questions respectfully. But respect wasn't the approach today. Before I even had the chance to answer, you had already decided who I was, what my fans believed, and what my motives must be. You weren't interested in understanding me. You were trying to prove a point. Joy's face flushed as she shook her head. That's not true. I respect different opinions. Reba smiled faintly. Joy, during this conversation you've described my supporters in negative ways, questioned my character, criticized the music industry I'm part of, and suggested my values were somehow lacking. If that's what respect looks like, then it's difficult to imagine what disrespect would be. A quiet wave of agreement spread through the audience. You're twisting what I said, Joy replied, her voice beginning to crack. I never said those exact things. Reba glanced toward the cameras. I believe your own words spoke for themselves. If anyone wants to hear them again, the recording is right there. For the first time, Joy seemed to realize how differently her comments sounded when repeated back. I was talking generally, she said. I wasn't making personal attacks. Joy, Reba interrupted gently. Just stop. You're making this harder on yourself. Stand by what you said if you believe it. Don't try to rewrite it now simply because the conversation didn't go the way you expected. The silence that followed filled the studio. Joy sat quietly, searching for something to say but finding nothing. You know what I think happened today? Reba continued. I think you've spent so much time surrounded by people who share the same opinions that you've forgotten thoughtful. Intelligent people can sincerely see the world differently. When every opinion around you sounds the same, it's easy to stop questioning your own assumptions. I don't think that's fair, Joy replied softly. Fair? Reba asked. This entire interview hasn't been fair. From the beginning, you've spoken to me as though I had something to defend. I came here as a guest, but it felt as though I was standing before a courtroom where you'd already decided the verdict before hearing any testimony. Whoopi finally leaned forward as if to step in. Before she could speak, Reba raised her hand politely. No, it's all right. I think everyone deserves to see this conversation through. Joy looked around the studio, hoping someone might redirect the discussion, but the cameras continued rolling and the audience remained completely focused. I only want people to think critically about the issues affecting their lives, Joy said, making one final attempt to explain herself. There it is, Reba replied with a calm smile. You want people to think critically, as long as they arrive at the same conclusions you have. That's not real critical thinking. Genuine critical thinking means accepting that reasonable, informed people can study the same facts and honestly reach different opinions. Joy lowered her head slightly. The determination she'd shown earlier had completely disappeared. Reba's voice softened. Here's what I hope people take away from this. We don't have to agree on every political issue to treat one another with dignity. We don't have to share the same beliefs to recognize each other's humanity. But when we assume anyone who disagrees with us must be ignorant or malicious, that's when meaningful conversations disappear. The audience slowly began applauding. What started as scattered claps quickly grew into a sustained round of applause. Joy remained silent, staring down at the table. I came here to talk about music, Reba said, because music has always brought people together. It reaches across political differences, economic backgrounds, and cultural boundaries. Maybe we'd all be better off if we spent a little more time building those bridges instead of creating new divisions. Joy looked up but seemed unable to find the right words. She opened her mouth briefly, then decided against speaking. The cameras captured the quiet ending to a conversation that had taken an unexpected turn, leaving everyone in the studio reflecting on everything that had just been said.